Is that pause enough for you, Will? Hi, welcome to episode 18 of MOMENTOUS Live. I'm Tristan Jutra, and that is...
Gray Williams.
And that is...
William Silver.
This week, some might consider it a bit of a slow news week, but luckily Audacity stepped in it to give us something to talk about. And we'll also talk a little bit about the downside of YouTube's recommendation engine and a fun release from Sony, gadget coming up. And of course, I forgot to include it in the title and description, but a little update from Nintendo and the Switch department that some people were expecting for E3, but didn't materialize there. So before we launch into it, luckily we had a bit of a reprieve weather-wise. It's amazing. We spent 25 minutes last week talking about the weather. I don't know if we're all turning into old men.
Turning.
And we were joined last week, of course, by the incomparable Jamie Reynolds that help us drag things out even longer than we usually do. Next week, we'll see the momentous return of Teja Custodi, but we might be missing someone else. You'll have to tune in next week to see who's not going to be here. And then you can decide whether or not to end stream. Anyhow.
Probably will.
So, how was your week, Will?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, it's been a quick week. Not as hot and humid as it was the week before. Lots of good things watching. A lot of good shows out there. Yeah, pretty good week. How about you guys?
You're starting a new gig next week.
I am.
We won't say where, so it's not to dox you, but you stoked about that?
Yeah, I've kind of, when it doesn't rain, it pours. I've had a couple things come in recently, so that's really awesome.
Excellent. And Gray, you're going to be leaving us for, I guess I just gave away the surprise.
Yeah.
You're going to be taking some time off, well-deserved time off. What are you up to? I mean, we won't say any, we will share your address in the show notes if anyone wants to rob your place. But what are you going to be up to for the next couple of weeks?
So we're actually headed to Vancouver Island, and so we're off to Jordan River for a little while, going to Tofino, and then spending some time in Horn Lake. So we've got a shift pod tent. I don't know if you've seen these. They're almost like ice fishing huts that were sort of modified to be Burning Man style tents, and they are fantastic. So that is now packed away downstairs. I've got my Yeti cooler all ready to go. We're the sacrificial bag of ice cooling everything down. That's the thing you're supposed to do. And we've got a bunch of new camping gear that we want to try out. I picked up a new hobby as well. I'm weaving things with paracord because the YouTube recommendation actually sent me a video. I'm like, I could throw some money at that. So you guys can look forward to belts and bracelets and things. It's like I'm 12 years old again.
It's like we've got a Girl Guide in the family.
Yeah.
Yep.
Crafting.
Yeah. The past week was interesting though. So I think I mentioned to you guys I got a heat pump installed. Right. And these things are incredibly efficient, right? You've got the condenser outside, you've got the head unit inside, and it just runs refrigerant between the two. And it's very, very quiet. The problem is that it produces condensation. And so we had a condensate pump on this thing, and that thing was the noisiest thing on the planet. It was going off every 3 minutes. They couldn't quite figure out why. I guess it's because it was pumping water 15 feet up to the roof. And so they actually put a gravity drain in. And it was 23 degrees throughout the entirety of that heat wave that we had here. But it was noisy. It's 23 degrees in here right now, and I have not heard this thing go off once in the last 2 days, and it is glorious. So if you're looking at a solution and you can't put proper air conditioning, traditional HVAC air conditioning, ducted air conditioning, a ductless mini split's not a bad way to go.
Cool. Might have to take that conversation offline because we're looking at solutions for the future. I mean, who knows what the rest of the summer is going to be like, but if what they say about climate change is correct, and of course we all know weather does not equal climate, but weather equals, weather trends equal climate, so probably good to get set up for our warm future and hopefully not have any towns burned down anymore.
Well, this was kind of the point though, because this thing is incredibly energy efficient, but it also works in the winter. It takes the heat from the outside, even in sub-zero temperatures, and heats the space. And it's more efficient than electric, which I have just electric here. So hopefully this year we'll see a lower bill, as well as being friendlier for the environment.
And it is, to clarify, it's coal powered, right?
It's straight, yeah. Actually, it's oil. You just dump it in by the barrel.
Perfect.
The souls of baby seals, I think, is the actual fuel.
No. Hey, they make oil. All right, so Last week, we talked a little bit about SpaceX's Starlink endeavor to throw hundreds and hundreds of satellites around the world to blanket us with some a bit quicker satellite internet, and through Starlink. And just a little follow-up on that, somebody slapped a Starlink satellite dish on their car's hood, and then police slapped them with a ticket. So, that's, they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I think this one person, probably a dude, thought, hey, I heard that these things could be portable, so let's see how far we could take it. I mean, apparently Elon, because he can be a little careless with his words, once said in a 2020 earnings call that technically you could buy a Starlink antenna and just stick it on the car. But however, it was not actually intended for cars. But, challenge accepted. And we've got some enterprising fellow who mounted it right on the hood of his car. And he basically said, well, does it not block, when asked by the police, does it not block your view while driving? The motorist said, only when I make right turns.
But
So once you check out the photos of this, it's a little ridiculous. It's basically a satellite dish on the hood of someone's car. I don't know whoever thought this would be a good idea.
That's nothing that a couple of GoPros and a few little screens wouldn't fix, really.
For sure. Oh, well, and then maybe we can connect that with when we were talking about Google I/O a few weeks ago, their new 3D rendered avatar video conferencing system. So maybe get that in there too, and you could actually make a 3D model of the road in front of you and then project that into a heads-up display.
I'm into it. I like it.
All right, we're just powered by the Unreal Engine while we're at it. Also in automotive news, the Tesla Model S Plaid, which we've talked about recently as well, blasts off in reviews, even without a gear shifter. So the Model S Plaid, as we know, is the one louder version of the Tesla Model S, continuing the Spaceballs tradition, going from ludicrous mode to Plaid mode. And some reviews are saying it does live up to its promise of going to 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 60 seconds. So in case anyone was waiting for the actual reviews, they're starting to come in. The only problem is you still have to put up with that ridiculous yoke steering wheel. I'm sorry, this steering wheels, round. It should be round, so you can turn all the way around a corner or even do a 360. This isn't Knight Rider, kids. What do you guys think? Do you think the yoke steering wheel is actually a good idea? I mean, aside from the cool factor?
I mean, I think it's prepping us for flying cars.
Oh.
Elon's always one step ahead, right? So this is it. And so, it's either that or it's just sort of a testament to like the yoke that he wants to bear for all of us. Maybe that's it. So here's the thing.
Delete your account right now.
when you were
Stream over.
When you were taught to drive, were you taught 10 and 2 or you were taught 3 and 9? What did you guys learn?
Well,
10 and 2, but honestly, I kind of do 12 and lean back most of the time.
Fair.
Yeah, well, I think I was taught 10 and 2 as well, but I believe 9 and 3 is actually better. Or actually, weren't they saying what are the other numbers? 8 and 4? I don't know, but I like Will's idea. Yeah, and then you could pretend to. You've got a standard, Will, so you've got an excuse. But yeah. We have automatics here, but I still like to like.
Don't racing tell you to do this or something like that? Isn't it like?
Do which
like
one?
At the bottom, it's like.
Yeah, I guess because you're kind of wrestling. I've never wrestled with my Mini Cooper. It's never happened. So I mean, I naturally gravitate towards 9 and 3, and I think I heard the same thing. It was better for control of the wheel, and so a yoke would tend to make sense. And here's the question: when was the last time that you really had to hand over hand something that wasn't in a parking lot or pulling into a parking space? You do that on the road very often?
No, this is the thing. It's also with power steering. It's become you don't have to do this as much anymore.
Yeah. And there's this is all by wire, right? Like nothing is sort of that manual connection anymore. So it doesn't really bother me, Now, what I would really like though is the ability to accelerate and decelerate by pushing on, because that would never have a problem, right?
Like a boat.
Yeah, and if you pull back on the yoke, it actually like ascends.
Yeah. See, now we're starting to get it, right?
Yeah, we just need to build off something. We'll workshop this a little bit more. My favorite power steering was probably my 1977 Oldsmobile Delta 88, which was basically a parade float. And it was the classic, with the bench seats. You could have your honey snuggle right up next to you, and then drive with a single finger on the steering wheel. It was like butter. The only problem is that when you ran around a corner, the suspension kind of rocked. I may be repeating stories because I am old, but also being old, I have the right to complain about stupid yokes in fancy cars.
But again, I think this sort of feeds into this whole thing that we've been talking about, how he's sort of like a 12-year-old. I mean, this is something like just putting like either a helicopter or a plane or like an F1 car. Like it's just sort of playing like this is something different. Now, having said that, he is rethinking things too, so that's interesting. So, I mean, he is bringing fresh ideas to automotive. So, but it does also strike me as a little bit of his, ooh, let's play F1 racer.
Well, in the video, you can actually watch the steering wheel, and it never really moves past that 12 position as they're driving. So the hand over hand even really doesn't, like, again, unless you're doing a full 180, it doesn't really look like it's something that happens very often. And I'd imagine in a lot of cases, obviously, you've got things like auto park.
What if some of us like to do full 180s in the middle of busy streets?
I'm going to give you then perhaps the Model S Plaid is not your next vehicle. Yeah, that's.
So they delivered their first 25 Model S Plaids at their Fremont, California launch event, and it's $130,000 US. Again, it's the reviews are saying it's making it's 0 to 60 time of under 3 seconds, and the reviews are generally positive. They're calling it cool. People are divided on the yoke, but it is being referred to as a technical tour de force. One writer said, "The Plaid sometimes had a melancholic effect on me. Man, nothing will ever feel fast again."
Oh, those are hasty words.
Yeah, hyperbole much?
Well, now that they canceled the Plaid Plus, maybe nothing will feel faster than this. So, with that in mind, competitors such as Rivian such as Lucid have their work cut out. Tesla and of course Rivian, and now we've got Ford with their F-150, but Lucid is starting with a sedan. They've got a $77,000 EV, which is more like the entry-level Model S's or the tricked-out Model 3s. But they're delaying their EV, their $77,000 EV, by nearly a year because they said they can't gamble on quality control. We have one shot at this. So Lucid, they've been talking this up for a while. I believe they're based in China, and their Lucid Air is their electric sedan. They hope to begin producing them last year, but then of course a little global pandemic happened. What do you think the prospects are for competitors to Tesla? There are that aren't the big names, say like Mercedes-Benz or Daimler-Benz, Ford, Toyota and whatnot. Do you think other EV upstarts actually have a shot?
Well,
I mean, not having the brand recognition that that Tesla or the old guard has.
I mean, anything's possible. It's more likely that it's going to be one of the more established brands, but it's possible for a boutique car to come on the scene. It seems to be, at least with gasoline engines, that there's a lot of boutique cars, at least in the sort of high end market, and the sort of competitors to Lamborghini and Morgans and stuff like that. There's a small run of Morgans that's being made every year, and they're kind of a niche car. So I mean, it's possible, but in terms of on a grand scale, there's a lot of economies of scale that have to be worked out. There's a lot of creating individual parts and that stuff. Even those like boutique cars that are being made, some of them borrow engines. Like for example, the Lotus and the Morgan borrow engines from, I think it's North American cars, because it's too hard to make your own engine and make the rest of the car at the same time. So it's possible, but in terms of creating a new sort of brand from from the sort of wheels up or the lug nuts up, whatever you want to say. I think it's a pretty difficult task to take on. It's easier just to make boutique cars. So I think it's probably Tesla was right place, right time, and had a certain amount of obviously capital and sort of brain power behind it. But it's probably more likely that it's going to be established brands that really drive this going forward.
And if you're going to make a boutique brand, like why not go ultra boutique and make this a $250,000 car, right? And like it's the new exotic shiny. But when it's 77 grand, it's like, oh, okay, so it's like a high end Buick.
Well, and this is the thing. I think Tesla's done the work here for a lot of people to follow. I think they have really just blazed the trail and said, okay, you were used to all of these brands, which over the course of the last 75 years have consolidated down to a scant few. But now it's like, do you need a dealer model? Well, we've proven you don't. Do you need to have all of this history behind you? You probably don't. And when you think about it, if we're looking at things like service, because that's the big one that always gets thrown at you, right? You want to buy a car from a dealer because you want to get service at the dealer, which is highly profitable for the dealer. Now, if you've got a ton of EVs out there, which, let's face it, Tesla was using off-the-shelf Panasonic cells in their batteries. If you need to replace these types of things, now a bunch of other vehicles are using similar stuff, and Tesla's done a fair amount of work in releasing a lot of patents that they've brought in. Now we're starting to see some standardized, sort of fifth track of vehicles here. I put this up on the screen here talking about boutique vehicles. This is the Ineos Grenadier. This is not an EV. This is a gasoline-powered vehicle, and it's very proud of it from a gas company. And so this is basically the Land Rover Defender. The replacement for that, because Land Rover has taken their whole line and they've softened it. I say that with such disdain. We had a Discovery back in the day, which my dad absolutely loved. Before that, got some friends in St. George, Ontario. My dad's friend Simon, who had a Series 2, Series 3, early 70s Land Rovers. These things were hard to kill. The Defender was that in the 90s, the early 2000s, and up to just a few years ago. And so when they basically softened the edges and made it more of a soccer mom SUV. No disrespect to soccer moms out there, you guys need your SUVs. But there was this gap in the market. And the fascinating thing is they actually took that shape of the Defender and said, we're going to make a car like this. And Land Rover went, you can't do that. That's our shape. And the trademark battle failed. So the idea here that somebody can come out of nowhere and say, we're going to make a car is incredibly exciting. Like this goes back to guys like DeLorean. We're gonna make something new. And these things have failed in the past, typically because there were constrictions on things like supply. The Grenadier is using, again, off-the-shelf parts. So you want to be able to swap it out for something. Like, look at these things. There's switches and dials on the dashboard. That is awesome.
The other thing is that sales models are different now, right? They don't have to rely on, like you say, the service plans, but also the sales centers, the dealerships. They don't have to rely on them. They can do online sales. They can find other ways of selling them. So they can charge
to unlock additional battery capacity.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think that leaves them more room if they do make more expensive cars. If they're making $250,000 cars, it's easier to make a profit because there's probably more wiggle room there than if you're making a $40,000 car and trying to make it get cheap enough that you can actually make a profit off of it.
I've got some friends actually who started a wine tour business in the Okanagan, and they're getting a Tesla Model X because it is going to be the vehicle that they use here. But I've also seen people who have talked about, doing things like renting their car out with things like Link. You make the car available for other people to use, and suddenly now your $120,000 vehicle is quite a bit more achievable for you.
And then you got someone else's farts in your seat.
Oh, there is that.
Now, Gray, what do you think the potential harm to Lucid's prospects are by delaying another full year? Because they were planning on launching last year, so it'll be 2 years from when they originally planned to launch. Like, is this going to be a fatal blow, do you think? Or do you think taking the time to get it right will actually, if you take the long view, it'll pay off?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, while all the incumbent players are rolling out their mainstream EVs to compete with Tesla, is it going to be too late for Lucid?
I don't think so. I think there's enough taste out there for people who are looking at the market and going, if this is in my price range, and if it does offer something new and something different, I think there's a lot of folks out there we still have a ton of early adopters that haven't actually adopted yet. Would you necessarily, like, if you bought a Hyundai before, do you want another Hyundai? No, maybe I'll try, if I'm going to try an EV, I'm going to try something new. And honestly, the damage to their brand and their damage to their chances far less than if they had something untowards happen. You take a look, even the Model S Plaid, there's already been one car fire, which let's be frank, right? The amount of car fires that we see in gasoline powered vehicles will dwarf whatever we've seen in EVs. So calm yourself. But the fact that it is this wonderful new vehicle that gets 2 point whatever seconds, it makes a great news story. That coming right out of the gate with a brand new brand, that's where the slope gets slippery. And I think you make the right choice. When human safety is on the line, make the right choice for people. Your business will thank you. Your customers will thank you. It's the right thing to do.
And of course, any time that EVs have tragic accidents, be they battery fire related or a semi-autonomous driving related, their competitors are going to do whatever they can to amplify those news stories. And so, living in the age of media manipulation, it's always something to be aware of. So, speaking of premium products, if you've got the budget for it, Sony's Xperia 1 III, there's a great name, is now available for pre-order if you can spare $1,300. And those are US dollars. On the bright side, it has a really cool camera. So they have Sony has really sort of kept their reputation going with their Xperia line, serving the high-end market, because there are other Android smartphone makers than Samsung, believe it or not, even though they seem to be dropping like flies, at least in LG's case. But it'll be available. This one will be available in stores August 19th. But for that price tag, you get a triple 12 megapixel rear camera with a main sensor, ultra wide sensor, and a periscope camera. Great, gotta love moving parts. And with a variable telephoto lens, meaning the camera can switch between 3 times and 5 times optical zoom. Gotta love some optical zoom now. The camera also boasts a 3D time of flight sensor, burst mode, that allows it to take 20 stills per second, as well as real-time tracking, which uses AI to keep the focus on moving subjects. So for the the speeds and feeds crowd, 6.5-inch, 120 hertz, 4K HDR OLED display, because your eyeballs are able to resolve those pixels on a screen that size. Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 chip, lucky 888, 12 gigabytes of RAM, which Android loves to have, 256 gigabytes of storage, a 4,500 milliamp hour battery with wireless charging, front-facing stereo speakers, and check it out, a 3.5 millimeter audio jack. I almost said 3.5-inch, but that would be gigantic. 3.5 millimeter audio jacks. So audio jacks are still a thing for those who want it.
Whoop, whoop.
Would this kind of device tempt you to switch to the dark side, Will, from iOS to Android? If you can.
No.
Stop.
I'm look, for people who want this, more power to you. No, just not for me. I will also say, I do sometimes find, maybe I'm getting into the nitty gritty here, that there sometimes stories are leading or color, or they have to find something to make the top level item. So they're calling this expensive. I'm not trying to say that it's cheap, but it's not like it's the only phone that costs this much, right? Like, it's not inexpensive, but it's in the category of like a Samsung or an iPhone, right? But with
no lower tiers, though. Like that's the entry levels to get in is at that price. So I think that's the difference here.
Oh,
like
okay.
you can pay less for a Samsung Galaxy phone or an iPhone, but you can get in cheaper on those ones, and it's only when you spec them up that they get to be this price, especially in US dollars. So I think that's the difference here, is that there's
no tiers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there may be higher tiers, but
just like Me in the Rain, no tiers.
Exactly. Now, is it the price that turns you off, or is it simply that you don't want to go to Android, or you don't not like Sony? Like, what's
this may be music to your ears, but I got a horse in the race, and I'm sticking with it. I mean, I'm an iPhone person, and I'm just used to the iPhone or the Apple ecosystem, And
Gotcha.
so I'm not really keen on switching myself.
Mhm.
I talked to my wife actually, who's looking, and I, Tristan, hold your ears. She's going to get an Android phone. She doesn't want anything to do with Apple. I don't know how she married me, but that's how it's happening.
Can we interest her in a Sony Xperia 1 III?
She said, look, she was saying that she's not all that interested because it's like more expensive than the one she wanted.
Sure.
And the camera isn't important to her. She could see that if you wanted the camera, it'd be great, but that's not her top level item. She wants the flip phone. She's interested in some of those flip phone crazy mutants that are rearing their head right now, and slideys and foldies and all these sorts of things. So I think she might tiptoe into one of those.
How about you, Gray? Is the camera enough to tempt you? If someone put a gun to your head and said you had to choose an Android phone, would this be it?
I've actually got one on order.
Yeah, no.
To get to it. Oh, I tried. Oh, how I try. I mean, honestly, here's the thing. I've got lots of friends who use Android, and they love these operating systems. I've got a MacBook sitting in front of me. I've got a MacBook Pro over there. I've got an iPad Pro. I've got you're not getting me, guys.
But there are Mac users who prefer Android phones. That's the thing. So if you had to choose,
everyone
Android
makes mistakes.
Would you rather? I mean, if you, again, like I said, someone puts a gun to your head and said, "Look, you got to choose a Sony Xperia 1 III or whatever this is, or the top of the line Galaxy phone, or something from OnePlus or Xiaomi, or you can import something from Huawei if you really wanted to be a rebel."
Probably
again,
OnePlus.
given the
probably OnePlus would be the
okay. Why?
Like honestly, Sony makes great cameras. They make great image processors. I love their Alpha line. They do some really great work in image processing. They're also slapping a coat of paint on top of Android. And if I'm already into an ecosystem that I'm not really feeling comfortable with, and you're putting your own manufacturer-specific software on top of that, that's a definite no. OnePlus is kind of getting close to the pin on that. The closest thing that we have, obviously, are the Pixel phones, but Google seems to be, I don't know, giving it short shrift. Like there's always something about the Pixel 3a or whatever it is that's just not quite where it needs to be. And you kind of look at it and go, how much money did that save you, and how many sales did that cost you? Because when I'm looking at it, like a lot of folks out there are looking at the Android flagship, they're looking at the Pixel devices and saying, these are the Android flagships. Why would you short sell that? And so, I mean, there's a couple of things like I'm a little curious about here. They put the headphone jack back in. Is this thing still waterproof or no? I couldn't really find it here nor there. And I'm not going to lie to you. That's come in handy for me. I've dropped this thing in my iPhone in a puddle a couple of times. And there's that initial like, oh no. And then, oh yeah, we're fine. Right. And so, between like Bluetooth headsets and AirPods and all that sort of, I don't need a headphone jack. I've actually got one of the little dongles for the one thing that I actually still plug in manually, which is an old Bluetooth speaker that the Bluetooth doesn't work on anymore. But it's premium phone, and there are lots of folks out there for whom the very latest in camera technology, I think, is kind of their thing. But I'm also looking at all of the image processing that's coming with things like iOS 15. And this is the place where Google pulled ahead. Like Google actually got me for a little bit there with their night shot. I was like, wow, that's really, really good. And the first iteration of Apple's night shot was okay, but it's at a point now where you kind of look at that and go, Apple's image processing right now is killing it. So even if Sony comes up with something, it's got to be not just better than that, but way better than that in order for me to think about it. And there's so much about my phone that is not just the camera, right? The integration with HomeKit, the integration with messages, all of the things that this thing connects to that this just wouldn't do. So there is another universe where we're having this conversation, and I've got a Sony OLED TV on the wall. I'm Android all through. I've got Windows Surface devices everywhere. That guy right there is loving this device. This universe, not so much.
I'll say another thing is that there are people like vloggers and stuff who use their phones basically as a second camera. They might have, a little Sony Alpha A7S II or 6500 or what have you, or a Power Shot or something like that, and use their phone as a backup camera. Or to have two angles on something when they're out vlogging. So maybe this is for them, for people who are really keen on stuff like that, but I think this is kind of a niche. But you know, if they're not getting the mass sales, they might as well do niche sales. So it is an approach.
Speaking of alternate universes, I long for an alternate universe where Sony was able to keep up their momentum from the 80s when they were the cat's butt and and let go of the 8-track format in the 2000s and embraced open standards like MP3 a little sooner and kept the walk, because they had that Walkman, an 8-track 3 Walkman that didn't play MP3s. And there's so many fumbles. Like, I was an all Sony guy in the 90s. Had the Sony rear projection CRT, was like one of the best you could get at the time for a reasonable price. Sony home theater receivers, the whole DVD players. You know, was a fan of the Blu-ray format, of course, and you know, like our PlayStation 3, still the PlayStation 3. Skip the 4 because I was waiting for 4K Blu-ray player, and so finally going to get a PS5 if they ever, you know, actually sell them to normal people. So now. I wish, like, they're getting some of their mojo back, like with the purchase of Konica Minolta and, you know, the imaging division there, and they've been making great sensors. You know, half of the smartphones out there use Sony sensors. I just wish that they were more mainstream in today's consumer electronics world. Like, people often don't think of Sony first for almost anything anymore.
It came down to hubris. Right? Like they were so far ahead that they started to say that we will dictate how this goes. And that came down to everything from, you know, their Inpo lithium batteries, which were brilliant, right? It would tell you down to the minute how much time you had left. Whereas everybody else had those little 3 battery slices. They had a patent on that. You know, their memory sticks, which when they first came out were faster than what you would see in a lot of other cameras. But unfortunately, this adherence to the idea of we have to lock down the ecosystem really doesn't work unless you're Apple.
Well, I guess Sony didn't have their own operating system. They had, I mean, the closest, you know, the closest they ever got to a smartphone back in the early days was they had a Sony Clie. I think that there was a like a phone version of that. Maybe they had the Clie PDAs, which were cool. Like, I had a Sony Mavica floppy drive based digital camera, which was amazing. You could hold like 10 or 12 photos on a 1.4 megabyte floppy disk. Wow. And it was a beast, but it had great optics, great glass, had a Zeiss lens to it. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think I left it on the top of a car at a wedding and it disappeared along with all the wedding photos from my sister-in-law. I was like, oh. And I had got a cyber shot subsequent to that. But I just, you know, they kind of have, they lost the lead in so many departments, and they're starting to gain some traction again with the Sony Alpha line of digital cameras, which is nice to see. But you know, I think one of the problems in their smartphone space is they're just not getting the distribution. What stores can you go to that actually have Sony Xperia phones for sale? Like, you know, the carriers barely have them, and even like the big box stores like Best Buy is like, good luck finding them. So I think they're just having real distribution issues because, you know, I think because Samsung is just so utterly dominant. And anyway, tear. So speaking of OLED screens, we had a little update from Nintendo. New OLED Nintendo Switch. Upgraded version of the Switch arrives on October 8th. $350 US, 7-inch OLED display, an enhanced kickstand, almost much wider and a little more versatile, multiple angles it can stand at. Better speakers, bumped up internal storage, now going to 64 gigabytes, up from 32 gigs. This interests me. The dock now has Ethernet support. So when you're docking the unit to play on the big screen, which is something, frankly, I would probably do if I had a Switch, would be more on the big screen. Mm-hmm. The mobile stuff is a bonus. I don't do a ton of mobile gaming. And it's a little bit wider and heavier. Now, no 4K gaming, no changes to the Joy-Cons, no Bluetooth audio, and the battery life is a little bit higher. It looks like, yeah, 4.5 to 9 hours of battery versus the Switch Lite's 3 to 7 hours, and so it looks like it's similar to the original. You guys are both Nintendo Switch owners and users. What's your take, Will?
You know, it's a nice little bump up. I mean, I think some people were expecting more, but definitely the OLED screen is nice. Improved battery life is nice. I have to admit that we mostly just plug it into the TV. My nephews have one each, and they basically never plug it into a TV. So I think it depends. It's nice to have both functionality. I think we took it on one vacation, my wife and I. But for the most part, I mean, we just plug it in. I mean, it's nice. I probably won't buy one, but it's not because I hate what they've done here. It's just I have one, and this isn't enough to motivate me to buy a new one.
How about you, Greg?
Looking at this it's basically taking a lot of the things that I've done to my Switch. I've got a USB Ethernet adapter, which gives me Ethernet on the dock right now. I've got a little Bluetooth adapter that fits onto the device, and then it's got a little headphone jack that cuts off the headphone so that it actually sends the audio through the USB to a Bluetooth headset. When we start thinking about things like 4K gaming on a device like this, portable, absolutely unreasonable for the Tegra processor that's in this thing. Like this would have eaten battery life, and on a screen that size, to your point, you're really not going to be able to tell the difference. When it's docked, it's going to be consuming more power, but again, it's going to generate more heat. There's a ton of other things that come in here. The other thing that you need to think about is developers, right? They're looking to not have this sort of schism in the Switch world. If you've got an original Switch, if you've got a Switch Lite, if you've got a Switch Pro, you should have a good experience, right? And for the most part, the PlayStation versus the PlayStation Pro was pretty similar. Towards the end of life, you started seeing things where, okay, the original PlayStation 4 was starting to chug, whereas the Pro was still okay. But having that sort of divide in the Switch world, I think is something that Nintendo is not. It's not something that they'd be famous for. They haven't done this type of thing in the past where they've really had that hard line in the sand and said, okay, if you got the old one, no, not so much. Even when we take a look at like the 3DS and the 2DS and all those sort of DS iterants, they tended to run the same software as each other. So this is going to be like the Switch is sold like gangbusters. It's been selling throughout the pandemic, that people have just been going back to it. And as a portable device for a lot of the games that are on there, it is a great gaming system for a lot of people out there. And you're seeing the stratification almost of like the Switch is one of the systems that anyone can enjoy. Whereas I think when you start to get into more dedicated gaming, your PC console, your PCs, your consoles like the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, that's kind of what people graduate to, despite the fact that a lot of us still really enjoy the Switch. So as an essential gaming piece, if you've already got a Switch, I mean, if you want to burn $350, I'm not going to stop you. This is not on my Christmas list. It really isn't.
So it's not worth it to you to get rid of the two adapters that you've got for Ethernet and Bluetooth?
They're already in there. What am I going to do with them? We're going to sell it to the guy on Craigslist? No, they're there. It works fine. I know this sounds like I've been body snatched, but it's fine.
I thought you were worse with money. Come on.
The other thing to keep in mind is that this is the system. People like Gray and I, and there are many adults who own this, and it's a great little system, especially if you're a Nintendo fan of some of the older games and some of the new licensed games like Mario Kart, Mario, Zelda, all that stuff. But one of the juggernauts in this is what was really sold the Game Boy. Is the youth market, is the younger market, right? And some of them don't necessarily care about all these ports and stuff. Some of them just buy the most recent one. My nephews have, I think they've had 3 Switches because they broke one and then each of them needed one. And it's just, so you might sell some more just because they're like, hey, it's the new thing out for Christmas. But, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm not sure this is going to drive a lot of more people to buy a Switch. I mean, we'll see. I could be wrong, but it just seems like it gives another excuse to have another option out there. And if it's using the same software, to Gray's point, and it's not taxing the developers or creating a schism, the only schism I can think of is but it was kind of a different thing, as when they did the DS versus the Game Boy, but that was clearly like a different system, even though it was basically sort of called the Game Boy at first. But you can still play the same software. It's just giving another option out there and another thing for people to buy at Christmas.
So, Gray, you don't think that given that this OLED screen, which is limited to 720p for mobile gaming, and then when it's docked is limited to only 1080p, given that certain people here maybe have very large 4K TVs, you don't think it's a mistake for them not to bump this one up to 4K?
No, and here's the reason why. I'm not playing cross-platform titles on my Switch. I'm playing titles that have been developed for the Switch on my Switch. Anything that is cross-platform, I'm playing on PC or I'm playing on PS5. So there really is. I'm looking at it going, like, could this look nicer? Sure. Is it $350 nicer? Is it?
But to my earlier point, like they haven't played this game. The Wii was the inferior system in that generation, but beat it because it got everyone playing fun games, and it didn't need to be super graphics. And I'm all for the Gears of War and the Fallouts and the God of Wars and all the other of wars. But I mean, there's something to be said for a little Wii Sports or a little Mario Odyssey. So I think that's not where they're winning people is on the 4K.
That sounds like it's almost the Scottish version. The little Wii Sports. We're going to play
the little Wii Sports. Yes.
Yeah, and they have indeed focused on the gameplay and the form factors. Now, the Wii U was a bit of a miss. They did upgrade it to HD from the standard definition of the Wii. And I have to admit, I was wrong on the Switch. When I first saw the initial videos of that, I thought, oh my goodness, this looks like such a gimmick. The Wii U had its own gimmicky aspects as well. I thought, oh, they're just doubling down. And it was a surprise hit. So, I was wrong on that one, and I'm glad that they were able to pull it out of the fire.
I think the Wii U was ahead of its time in some ways. It obviously it didn't do everything right, but it was trying to do a lot of stuff. And in many ways, the Switch is the refinement to that, right? Yeah. Like it just wasn't there yet, and they needed one more go to get it right. That's my opinion. What do you think, Gray?
I mean, I ended up replacing the battery in the Switch paddle thing. What the hell was that called? I don't know.
Oh, I can't remember.
The switchboard prior to the Switch. But I mean, like the battery life was just too short. So I ended up with it plugged in, or I ended up, buying a new battery and swapping that out. And it always did feel a little clunky, right? Like this idea of down, up, down, up. You're just, it didn't really feel quite centered. And we've been doing that since, the GameCube with the Game Boy Advance SP. I've still got, I think, 3 or 4 Game Boy Advance SPs and a GameCube and Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles around somewhere. That was me bad with money. Let me buy 4 portable systems to go with a home system so that 3 of my friends can come over and play this Final Fantasy or The Legend of Zelda, whichever one it was that 4 of them were together. It was
the multiplayer Pac-Man was fun too.
That was me bad with money. This is me going, you know what? Honestly, for the amount of time that I'm playing this, whether it's Mario and Rabbids or like Breath of the Wild is actually that's almost the system seller for me was the one. And so Breath of the Wild 2 is coming, which actually leads me to sort of the thing that's been in the back of my mind, putting words to it now, which is I'm not looking at a ton of games that are coming out for the Switch and going, okay, this is what's going to sell me on a new system. This is what's going to sell me on that game. But unless there's a severe quality difference in the game, I'm probably going to play that game and enjoy it just as much on my OG Switch as I would on a Switch Lite, as I would on a Switch Pro. So
this is classic consoling though, right? It's like near the end of a life cycle of a console, you come out with different flavors, you come out with white versions or slim versions or what have you. This is maybe a little bit of tweak in the sense like a handheld, like a 3D DS, or in this case an OLED screen. This is ushering in another console, right? This is the last gasp.
Yep.
Sorry?
I said, here we go again.
Yeah, here we go again.
And going back to Sony for a moment, it's like, I guess the Vita. I actually want to pick up a Vita. I really enjoyed the PSP. A friend of mine gave me his original PSP 1001, and there's a couple of games on there that I've been playing literally since 2007 on the PSP and on the PS3. That's the way I roll. And so I would love to get a Vita for the upgraded version of that same stupid game. And what's next? Is Sony totally giving up on their portable gaming?
Oh yeah, that's done. Yeah, that's way done. You want to play a Sony portable game? You've got the PlayStation app on iOS and Android. Go for it. Good. I'm just saying we're not going to say when your birthday is, but it's coming up. Don't buy a Vita.
Don't cry for me.
Yeah, don't cry for me, Vita.
Don't cry for me. I bought a Vita. Okay, fair enough. The audacity of that statement. He said, segueing.
Oh, we're not getting there yet. We're not there yet. We have to take YouTube to task first.
Oh, okay.
We're not there yet. So yeah, I wish Sony would just. Anyway, I guess they got to focus. So anyway, moving right along. YouTube. The recommender AI is still a horror show, finds major crowdsourced study. Crowdsourced study brought to you by the Mozilla Foundation, of course. So they recruited lots and lots of people to share their experiences with YouTube and its recommendation algorithm. Especially considering the number of regrets that viewers have, including videos spreading COVID-19 fear-mongering, political misinformation, and wildly inappropriate children's cartoons. 71% of the respondents of their regrets come from videos that were recommended by YouTube's algorithm itself, which just really incriminates YouTube's AI-powered algorithm in pushing junk into people's eyeballs. Have you either of you found yourself watching videos and having the autoplay on and just sliding into the next video, or having some recommendations and next thing you know, like you're watching videos like pro-Nazi videos? Because that's the thing, right? You just go down this rabbit hole and all of a sudden it's Nazis.
It's come close. It's come close. So a couple of years ago, I went to get my firearms license, which you were there, and so I want to be a cowboy. Right, so I like old style lever guns and 6-shooters. This is my jam, and so I end up watching cowboy action shooting videos, which is a competition where people shoot old style guns in crazy ranges that look like saloons and things. It's neat. And suddenly you're sitting there and you're working away, and YouTube's on in the background, and then you've got some very very strange stuff that pops up from the American right. There's one Warrior Poet Society, which doesn't sound that bad at first, but you start hearing these guys, where this guy's a former soldier, and he's talking about essentially, without using the word, the oncoming storm. You're like, hang on a darn second.
We'll be touching on that a little later. Thanks, I will.
And then you're looking through, and you see the videos that have played. Then you're kind of half paying attention to you in the background. You've got to go through and report this video. I don't want to see this. Report this video. Don't show me this channel. But the sheer quantity of what I consider to be very distasteful content, and it's like it doesn't seem like there's any eye to Google's AI. It seems like it finds a couple of key terms that are related, and then just sends you down the pipe next to those videos. Because if there was any intelligence related to that, it would see all of the other things that I watch, all of the other things that I actively click into, and it would start to develop a bit of a profile of me. But it hasn't. It's literally just looking at it and going, okay, you watch this, you're probably going to like that because they have the same word in them. And that word is gun. Okay, no, I want to be Briscoe County Jr., not these psychopaths. And so that is what I've seen for the last little while. And I'm on a one-man mission to block all of these channels from my personal platform, because I just do not want to see it anymore.
Why won't you show me more action figure unboxing videos, damn it?
Yeah.
How about you, Will? How far down the rabbit hole is YouTube taking you?
I don't go very far down the rabbit hole. I mostly I watch a lot on YouTube. We're watching a ton, especially during the pandemic, and I just don't take the recommendations. I don't trust them if it's not something that I know of or I'm interested in. And then half the time too, and this is, I know I'm watching stuff on YouTube. If I do click on something that's a random thing, maybe that's an interesting, show description or what have you, click on it, it's just garbage quality. It's like some guy talking through a tin can with still images up on the screen or something. I just don't trust anything that I don't know is either A, the content's is interesting enough for me to watch poor quality, or B, of quality material or visuals that I want to engage in. Because to Graham's point, there's a lot of garbage out there, both in terms of quality and content, that I just, and I don't let things autoplay. My nephew does that all the time, and then we're into Minecraft videos and stuff like that, and it's just how many Minecraft videos have you been watching? And these are getting quite dodgy.
Turn autoplay off. I remember a couple of years ago there was all sorts of concern because many children's videos that were popping up featured a lot of recognizable characters such as Elsa from Frozen and Spider-Man and Peppa the Pig doing all sorts of unspeakable things, going to the dentist and having teeth removed and just all sorts of horrifying things for children. It's what is going on and why? But I guess it's using these characters to get the attention and then keep people watching it. So truly bizarre. But I think the best advice for stuff like YouTube and so much else of online content pardon me as I choke here.
So there's a great YouTube video on how not to choke online.
Yeah. But another interesting thing. Just
I'm not finished my point.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was trying to fill in when you were dying.
I appreciate it. Oh, you'll get a chance in just like 2.5 seconds. I obviously really worked up about the YouTube algorithm, guys.
Yeah, fair.
No, I think the lesson with a lot of online content, including YouTube, is to be consuming it purposefully.
Yes.
If there are channels you like, subscribe to those channels. Hit that notification bell. Look at those things. Have a look at recommendations, but turn autoplay off, because if you end up, if dodgy stuff ends up playing, you're getting AdSense dollars to those dodgy videos because they're playing and the ads are playing ahead of them, et cetera, et cetera. So just be very mindful. Search for creators deliberately, or keywords deliberately. Go for recommendations from people you know, and don't let the algorithms push stuff into our faces and our feeds. Be it YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, which are all relying heavily on algorithms. TikTok, of course, which has a very powerful algorithm, because they're all forms of mind control at the end of the day. Because you think about it, if there is malignant forces behind any of these algorithms, they could actually mold the brains of the entire viewership if they wanted to, but just by subtly directing viewers to one type of content or another. We're trusting that the algorithm is just simply AI and it doesn't know good from evil. It's just looking on to keep you engaged. But just intentionality when it comes to consumption of online content, I think is super key. Well, I'm finally finished. You can make your point now. Thank you. And I'm
just to sort of tag team off your point. Part of the stuff with autoplay, when it, and some notable examples of adult content with in a sort of children's television wrapper, they tried to come in with some more limits about declaring yourself adult content or not. And I know some of that got dialed back, but there was a huge freak out amongst a lot of YouTube channels I followed a couple of years ago, because I follow a lot of things that look like they could be for kids and not always are, like, action figures doing funny skits or something like that, like Robot Chicken and things like this that aren't necessarily, child-focused content, right? Or even things like action figure unboxings. I don't know who's searching for 1970s G.I. Joe action figures, but these are often getting flagged under children's content, even though it's really adults watching it, right? So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of strange things that can go on with the algorithm, because it just doesn't have the mind of a person, right?
Again, none of the intelligence where there should be intelligence.
Well done. Oh, the audacity. So, something blew up in the last couple of days all over the net, claiming that beloved free open source audio editing application Audacity is now a possible spyware. Remove it ASAP. And this was according to fosspost.org, which is an independent publishing organization, a bit of a watchdog. And they basically took a look at the updated end user license, got purchased, I believe, by another organization based in Russia a little while ago called, I think it's Muse Group. 2 months ago, they were purchased. And the terms of service now say all sorts of things about your personal information. It may be shared with, in Russia and the United States and so on. And a lot of people are like, oh, and this one report set a lot of people's hair on fire. And then, of course, there was a follow-up from Audacity saying, this has all been blown out of proportion. This is just standard boilerplate, text, et cetera, et cetera. And they are, they're just using it for analytics. They're not sharing it, with any nefarious forces and whatnot. So where does the truth actually lie? Will, you told me early today that you went and uninstalled Audacity. What inspired you to do that?
Look, first of all, this is interesting, but it's not the only factor. It kind of reminded me I never use Audacity anymore. Okay. I mean, I have the Adobe's, which has all of the things.
Adobe Audition,
yeah. So to be honest with you, I haven't even opened Audacity probably in 2 years. And this was more of a reminder to me like, oh, I should probably remove things that I'm not using in case something like this is an issue. And it's just gone under my radar because I don't use Audacity anymore.
All right. So where do you land on this, Gray?
I'm not surprised that this is the action that Muse has taken, but I will say this is typical scummery, right? This is somebody who's purchased something and then has decided that we're going to take the spirit in which this was written. This was written under the GPL, and we're going to add a bunch of different terms and conditions to how people can use this. This was written as free and open source software, and now it is. If you make a change to this, whether or not you are going to be profiting from it, we're going to own those lines of code as well, which you don't actually have to commit back based on licenses here. And so it's fascinating to see them do this. Free open source software does what free open source software does, so there is now going to be an Audacity fork, which is going to probably be better than what we've had. Audacity's felt really stagnant for the last little while. There's been lots of little things that the hoops that you had to jump to as far as getting MP3 encoders and things like that. And it didn't really feel like it was under good stewardship then, and it definitely doesn't feel like it's under good stewardship now. I have to chuckle because, in this statement that they released, they said that they would cooperate with any competent law enforcement that requested. And I take a look at a lot of the countries that they are suggesting may ask for this, and I'm not saying that there's competent law enforcement there at all. So for me, Audacity's gone. I basically went through. I've got an app called App Zapper, tossed it. I do like having a free open source solution, so I'm going to follow the fork. In the meantime, I have something that's not free and open source, which is Logic from Apple. And I'm using that, and it's going to be a stopgap until I have Audacity again, because I did use it for certain things. So yeah, I'll miss it, but it's almost like it's a little like Paul Walker in the Fast and the Furious saga, where you miss it and you remember for what it was and not the CGI thing that it became.
We watched number 4 this past weekend as well. We're making our way to catch up. I think we will have. Oh, Stephanie still hasn't watched 5, 6. Or 7.
Oh, those are the best.
Has she seen 8? I'm not sure. So yeah, it's a shame because the legacy of Audacity is such that a lot of people who are just getting involved, maybe starting their own little podcast or experimenting, doing school projects. It was great to have this free open source software to use without having to learn Logic Pro, which is like crazy. I mean, you could use GarageBand, which is more music oriented, although some people were using it for editing podcasts. Again, it could be overkill for some purposes. If people already subscribe to Adobe Creative Cloud, Adobe Audition is a great option. I've used Audacity myself. The interface is a bit of a garbage fire, kind of like GIMP, as a Photoshop alternative. Because it's non-native, right? It's the kind of app that's written to work across various platforms, and as such is just terrible to look at and actually use. But it works. It largely works. So, hot tip for anyone who wants to grab a copy of Audacity before the new terms take effect. The current version 3.0.2 does not support data collection of any kind and has no networking features enabled. So these new terms of service take effect in version 3.0.3. So if you want to grab the last quote-unquote pure version of Audacity, go grab 3.0.2 for your platform of choice, be it Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. So we'll see what happens if the pushback is strong enough for them to relent on there. A couple of good things before we wrap up. Will, Scratch, there's something called Scratch with an X. I don't know how you actually pronounce it. Visualizer app. What is a Scratch Visualizer app?
So I'll try to be a bit. I could talk about this for 2 hours, so I'll try to keep this.
You got
brief.
2 seconds.
Yes, this is something that I am super psyched about. One of the communities I'm involved in is super psyched about. So I'm a Scratch DJ, and this is basically, there's a whole long history about how to actually annotate, write, and learn scratches, because it's coordination between record hand and a fader hand, and there hasn't been a lot of good ways. They developed something called a turntable transcription method, was a way of writing down. So these wave patterns with sort of dots to show breaks where the fader movement is. This is actually a computer program or an app that'll show you what you're actually doing. So not just notating it and trying to replicate it, but actually show what you've done. So this is a huge advance in terms of learning, in terms of communication to other people, in terms of documenting scratches maybe you came up with. So the community out there is super psyched about this. Once this was released, within 12 hours, somebody else had been working on it and they released their version as well. So now there's two competitors out there. I guess the other guy was like, oh no, someone came out with it before me and I was just about to release it. So so there's two versions out there. I think the other one is called Scratch Labs or something. It's like hot off the presses. It was literally just announced like about 6 hours ago or something like that. So super psyched about this. It's really cool using MIDI. It can be used on Tractor, it can be used on Serato. I'm kind of hoping that Tractor or Serato or some DJ software actually takes this on, so it's not just an app you have to open up in the corner. It's actually baked in to some of the DVS software. I think that would be really great. It's a bit of a niche with Scratch DJs, but there still is a strong community. But yeah, so I'm super psyched about it, but it's kind of cool as well. It's a bit of an advance.
Nice. Gray, you also are a bit of a mix master yourself. What you gonna? This kind of thing interest you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Will, you and I are gonna have to talk later this summer, because this is something that I don't do, and I would love to give it a shot. The one thing that I do remember. You remember CSI New York? They actually did an episode where TTM was featured.
Yes, there's a whole story about that I can tell you offline. But
next episode.
Next episode, yeah.
Or 2 weeks from now, because since someone's not going to be here next episode. We're going to delve into the storm maybe next week, because we need to wrap for time. Before we let you go, I would encourage you all to check out our compatriot Tasia Custodes' latest YouTube video, Productivity Tips for Google Chrome. And even if you aren't a Google Chrome user, there are some of the tips in there that actually apply to some other web browsers, such as Safari and Firefox. And most of them actually will apply to other Chromium-based browsers, such as Brave and Microsoft Edge. So I encourage you to check out Tasia's latest video, shot from Canada in Canadian quarantine. So that's why you might see a little bit of a different background there. But we will see Tasia next week. Fingers crossed. We probably won't see Mr. GW over there, but have a great camping trip. For the rest of you, you can find out more about us at momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv, instagram.com/momentous.tv. Search for my name on YouTube, and then maybe you can find Momentous that way. If you can spell my name.
This is the bitter portion of the...
Yeah, I've got to put some proper links on the website, too. I've got to update our... The to-do list is way too long. But as always, this has been my favorite day of the week, hanging with you guys. And Graham, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you next week, and we'll see the rest of you next week on Momentous Live.